End Space, episode 11. Interesting change of plans here. I don't even know where the stupid camera is because I have a weird setup right now, but yeah. I have another plan, but that's going to have to wait until I blow off my steam a little bit here, because I was literally just going through an old external hard drive of mine, and I figured out that I designed the logo for Salesforce in January of 2013 for about $200 without being aware of it at all until just now. And yeah. I am completely stunned about this discovery, because I had no idea. And to have designed the symbol for what I truly I don't even have words for this. It's horrible. It's really horrible. It's horrible. And it's not a matter of having been paid nothing and not knowing. It's the fact that I have a part in that logo that's gonna stay. I don't even know where to go with this. It's horrific. Yeah. So that sort of really threw me off a bit. And I was literally just digging through an old external hard drive of mine that I hadn't taken a look at in years and years and years. It's because I dump files on there, I back computers up, and I stick the things away in a corner somewhere, and then I dug it up because I dug it up because I was looking for some old images, and then I just came across this, and it's really quite shocking. Yeah. Wow, this episode is so totally different than what I'd expected to be doing, and my whole energy has so unexpectedly changed. But this is a monumental moment, I suppose, and I guess it's on the record, whatever this record is out here in this space, floating around. This is pretty amazing. But anyway, sorry about all these pauses. It has to do with the fact that I'm truly in shock, and I will get over it and get back to Greg, stop. Just because I'm angry, you don't have to be. No. Yeah. So I'm going to try and get myself back into my space of where I really was at, because this is just like a weird distraction that just it literally just came up. I mean, it literally just happened. It just fucking happened. It literally just happened. I sat down and looked at this hard drive and just sort of went through files one by one, and there it was. Crazy. Anyway, that's not what I wanted to talk about. And doesn't really matter all that much. It's just kind of shocking. Yeah. What I wanted to talk about, and this is like ultra free flow style. I actually have my stupid phone sitting here, so I don't know. Fucking whatever. Fucking amen. Oops. What I wanted to talk about was something really different. Something that's beautiful. Oops. And this is kind of an interesting setup that I have here, which I built this weird contraption here. I built it a few years ago. I think I built this in 2011. I built it, yeah. And it's my version of a heavy duty pochade box. Pochade box is a box that you take outside to paint plein air paintings, and I had this vision at the time that I wanted to sit on the ground and paint, because there's something that happens when you actually touch the earth, when you absorb energies differently than if you're just standing in shoes. So even if you're just barefoot on the ground, you make a different connection. And if you're sitting, painting takes on a different kind of it takes on a different mode. Maybe I could call it that, a mode or an atmosphere. And so I built this box, and I thought it was really clever because, oops, it's got, I'll take the brushes off of here. It's got these little shelves in the front here to where you can slide the wet canvases. You can slide them in, and it's got a strap so you can carry it, and then this is you can put this up and for stabilizing your paintings. I thought it was really rather clever. The problem with it was that it's not all that light. It's not that lightweight to carry. So turns out that it's probably more practical to carry an easel. But I thought I had made something that was compact and practical and that could sort of serve as a multifunctional object, you know, and instead of picturing Vincent van Gogh, picturing him, schlepping his easel and his canvases and all of this. He would carry it all kind of loosely in his bag with his paints and all of that. I picture him doing that, and and I thought, well, I could maybe improve perhaps on this on this idea and see if I can make it a little bit more practical. But it turns out that it wasn't all that practical because it's terribly heavy and you can't really carry it all that far. Plus it's not, as you can see, it's not all terribly stable either. It's going to pose a little bit of a problem, but I'm using it because otherwise it wouldn't be possible to see this if I worked on the flat table. So yeah. Vincent is very, very special painter to me. In fact, I've had conversations with him a lot. I have imaginary conversations with Vincent, and I drink my coffee with him in the morning, so to speak. But what I really wanted to talk about was his favorite color. And Vincent van Gogh's favorite color was yellow. And there, maybe with the exception of El Greco, who also used yellow in the most wonderful of ways. There are a few artists who were able to really work with that color because it's very difficult to work with. It has within it the potential of gold, of truly creating something that glows like gold, but the pigment is difficult because it's transparent. It's transparent paint, and you have to work with it pretty thickly in order for it to lose that transparency. It's extremely difficult to work with yellow. It's a magical color. I'm probably going way out of order here, but I wish I could say all the things that I want to say, but I don't have the words. So anyway, this is here a little panel that is actually it's a wooden panel. It's a beech wood, which is fairly hard wood, and then there is Belgian linen that is stretched over it. I usually try to work with materials that are as historical as possible and that follow the same processes as they would have in the past. So in this case, this is unprimed Belgian linen. That's how it starts out. And I don't like the flexibility of painting on just a canvas that's stretched over just stretcher bars. I don't like the way that it feels like it's bouncy. It doesn't. I don't respond to that well on a very subtle kind of a level, because there's something that happens, sort of a neurofeedback between the tools and the surface that must be in tune with the artist. So for me, I don't like the flexibility of canvas that's just stretched over stretcher bars, but sometimes it's nice to have actual canvas texture. So then in that case, I stretch this. I stretch the raw linen. It's like I said, it's Belgian. It's Belgian linen. It's really the finest, in all senses, the finest linen that there is. It's beautiful. I mean, even this the way that it's striped here is just so beautiful, and the practice of making, folding, and creating the overlaps is beautiful. It's a beautiful process from start to finish. So I stretch this, and once I've got it stretched as much as I can, just in its raw form, I prime it with a rabbit skin glue, and then afterwards with an oil primer. Instead of using gesso, you can get oil primers. In the past, you would actually use lead white. So if you were Rembrandt, or if you were Leonardo, you would have primed, or actually your apprentices, you wouldn't be doing this yourself. You would have primed your canvases or your panels with lead white, with oil paint, but that would require drying time of probably about a year before you can paint back onto the lead white, because of the the molecular movement. And if you have different drying times between different layers of paint, and there's any kind of movement in between those layers of paint, then it results in cracking. And that cracking happens after hundreds and hundreds of years because of that very, I mean, it's at the tiny, it's the molecular, the atomic level that there's this shaking that's happening, and it happens at different rates, so it can cause cracking. So that's why if you go to a museum, you will see that some paintings look like they're in perfect condition and other paintings don't. They have cracks, and this has to do with two things. It either has to do with the primer, or it has to do, or three things actually, or it has to do with a medium, or it has to do with varnishes. And all of that, though, goes back to movement that's happening there at the very, very small scales. All this kind of movement, it's all moving. So if the movement interferes, then yes, there's going to be cracks. So lead white is the ideal primer, but it takes a really long time to dry, and it depends on how well you can predict what size work you're going to produce, and what shape panel you want to make and whatnot. So I personally I can't pre-plan that way. I have something that comes to me, and then I must do it, and I must do it now. And so I need to speed things up a little bit. So thankfully there's oil primers now that are still oil primers, but they dry quicker, they dry overnight. So yay to chemistry. But that's just the surface. That's just the support of a painting. But the support is just as important to the work, aesthetically and spiritually perhaps, as it is in terms of longevity. And the success of the image depends on the soundness of the surface. And yeah, restorators know that. It's very interesting thing to study is restoration of paintings. And there's so much that's been happening in the probably in the last 5 to 10 years as far as optical devices are concerned that can photograph, quote unquote, into the surfaces and analyze the different components that were used in the paintings, what kinds of pigments were used. This can all now be resolved with spectral imaging, and it's absolutely fantastic. It's incredible. But I could talk about this forever. Forever and ever and ever. There's so many things. It's just, yeah, I could talk about it forever, but I wanted to talk about yellow. So I have to go back to yellow. And paint. I have two kinds of paint that are sitting here. I'm really hoping that this is all on film because I won't be able to do this again. Especially not my utter complete shock at the beginning of this, because that was, I just about had a fit. Anyway, I have big tubes of paint here. Very big tubes of paint. And I have smaller tubes of paint. Now they're not exactly the same colors. I have a yellow ochre here, whereas I don't have one here. But these are student grade paint, and they're fairly inexpensive. They cost about $10 a tube, and they are done with artificial pigment. So it's chemical pigment. It's not natural pigment, and so they're a lot cheaper, and they're useful when you're learning, and they're also useful if you're painting very, very large, to where you would paint the big picture. You would paint the big picture with cheap paint, and then you would reserve details and accents for the finer paints. And this here is Old Holland paint. And Old Holland paint, in my opinion, is probably the best oil paint that's out there. What's remarkable about this, and this goes back to Vincent, what's remarkable about this particular paint here is that this is actually truly the same paint that Vincent van Gogh used in his paintings. The process that the company has used has not changed. They're using exactly the same methods. The pigment is hand ground, stone ground. It's stone ground pigment. It's real pigment. It's pure linseed oil, though this is the real deal. This is the actual real deal. And it's it's a communion. It's a communion that can happen, and it's quite special, I have to say. I mean, they're price-wise, this here is a cadmium yellow medium, so it's it's made with cadmium, obviously, as opposed to a cadmium yellow medium hue, which is not made with real cadmium. This tube of paint, which is obviously quite small, this tube of paint costs about $45 for a tiny tube of paint like this. So that's considerable. It equates to me to painting with sort of jewels. That's kind of what it's like. It's painting with jewels, or with really, you're painting with fine metals. You're painting with very fine metals. And what's interesting about this is actually the fact that that this paint would have been at least as expensive in the 19th century as it is now, if not more expensive. And Vincent's paintings are very, very thick. He painted heavy impasto paint. So he went through a lot of paint, and actually reading his letters to Theo. If you read Vincent's letters to his brother Theo, you get the most wonderful insight into the mind of an artist that you could ever hope to get. And they're wonderful. But he always ends with, I need more canvas, I need more paint. And that's something that gets lost quite frequently in people's minds as far as Vincent goes. Everybody says, oh, he never sold a single painting. You know, he was a poor artist. No, he was a very fortunate artist, because he did not have to sell any paintings in order to survive. He had a brother that was supporting him his entire career. Theo basically paid for everything. He paid for his paint. He paid for his living quarters. He paid for his food. He was essentially his own private patron, and that's something that usually gets left out. So Theo must have invested a considerable amount of money into all of this paint, and then in return, of course, Vincent would send him all these all the paintings that he made, and that's how his body of work ended up being basically one solid, cohesive body of work that was passed on to Theo, and then after Theo's death went on to his wife, who then ended up selling. And it's very rare that you have actually an entire body of work of an artist in one piece. And that's kind of an interesting idea to have the one life all in one place, and to pass it on to somebody, the next generation, to be able to pass on the entire life. Yeah. Back to yellow. This is so free flow right now. It's crazy. I usually have some kind of a something, but I really don't have anything. And the dog is crying by the door, and I don't care. She's just gonna have to deal. I'm gonna put some of this paint out. Cadmium yellow is toxic. It has, of course, this lead white, as is most of original painting media. but that's what makes it all the more intriguing. Mm. So this right here, this is the cadmium yellow medium. This here is Scheveningen yellow, and it looks a little bit more like the yellow ochre. And then this is I believe this is Scheveningen. Oh no, wait. Wrong. This is cobalt yellow. This is Scheveningen yellow light. And you know, this light isn't terribly great, but they have really different temperatures, these yellows. And I'm going to put these out on the other side, or maybe right next to them. See, and you can kind of see how the oil is separating from the pigment. It's poor quality, completely different consistency to the paint. It's runny. And that's I mean, that is right here. This is the perfect example of poor quality paint versus beautiful paint. This is good for big stuff and for learning when it doesn't matter, but when it does matter, this is where it's at. This is it. This is awful right here. Terrible thing. If I spread this out, I hope this is visible. This is supposed to be more or less the same color, and this is so transparent. This is already much more opaque. And it also holds marks in a very different way. It holds a brush stroke, or it holds finger mark differently. So much different way of working with the paint. I did a demonstration once as part of a course I was taking, and it was really quite horrible because the only paint that I had was this kind, and I was struggling with the medium so much. It was just like, it was awful. It's just like pushing around goop, really not a good thing. It was quite frustrating, but anyway, I think probably the difference here is pretty obvious. So this is not something that is very necessary. And it's really extremely transparent. It's frustrating, very frustrating kind of paint. This is the one time where maybe transparency isn't such a great thing, unless you're trying to glaze. I don't know, but this is really awful. I don't like it. So it would be good to kind of create a lay-in, like an underpainting or something of that sort. But yeah, if you look how thick this is. It's beautiful, and it's it's difficult for me to, because I'm kind of like painting upside down here, so it's going to be more of a an abstract kind of a painting. And this is, whoops, shoot, this is where it goes back to the painting goes back to the actual physical aspect of working, because the pleasure is in the physical experience as much as it may be in the actual content or in the subject matter. If you take all that away, what remains is the physicality of what it feels like. What does the brush feel like when it touches the canvas? How much pressure do you apply, and what is the feedback from the surface? What you get back as you're applying the paint. It's very, very sensual experience. It's painting is extremely sensual activity if you're with it, so to speak. If you're aware of what it is that you're doing. It's kind of hard to talk and paint at the same time, because there's two parts of the brain that are involved that it's very difficult to switch back and forth. So it's the painting is more of a place without words. So I'm not going to talk for a bit. Even if I am laying on the gold thick here, even if I paint very thinly with this yellow, the transparency is quite different. It's so odd to work upside down here. The cover is so much different and so much better. Painting is in a lot of ways very much like sex, making love. It's all of that. It has all those things, all that. It has all that in it, and in fact, back to Vincent. Vincent would actually do this. He would lick his paintings. He would literally eat his paint. I mean, you might wonder what that would do to a man if he were to eat a lot of cadmium yellow. I don't know. That might be part of the reason for why it had some effects on who knows what. But then absinthe probably had something to do with that too. But there's something so yeah, it's visceral. Paint is something that you want to just kind of